Oh God, it's so exciting.
Happy Hail Bob Day.
It is a happy Hail Bob Day.
Hello, the Curse of Diarm.
It's the best finishing score we've seen at 5-star level.
That was our elo coming into the competition.
Eventing Manager is back.
Best show that we have, Alphabetti Spaghetti.
Looking forward to seeing quality horses.
Still a great day for Ireland.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
I mean, you're a bit of an eventing geek just like us.
And it's time to get on with the show.
Welcome to the Equine Eventing podcast, and listeners, have we got an absolutely cracking episode in store for you, because we are picking up the US horses to watch in 2022 in an episode very kindly supported by our lovely friends over at Parker Equine Insurance. We have just done actually a very similar show on our sister show, the Jumping Podcast, picking out the 7 top US jumping horses to watch for the year. And now we are going to do the same for the eventers. The first thing I would say is our list is way past 7. So we will try and narrow it down, but no promises whatsoever. I will start by introducing our guests. Welcome back to the show. She is always a massive hit. Frankie Thieriot, Stutes, good to have you back with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys and talk about, which ones are going to be good this year, we think, here in the States.
And we're looking forward to picking your brains, because you've seen a lot of these horses run already this year. So we're going to hopefully get the inside line on who is looking on great form. Also with us, Dee. This is a fun show. We have been talking a lot about US eventing over the last few years, and they had such a strong finish to the end of 2021 that it feels like momentum is building and all eyes are on Protoni for the World Eventing Championships. But these are the horses that could make it happen.
I kind of feel a little bit what's the word? I suppose I'm quietly excited. I'm nervous. I'm in that kind of happy middle excited zone whereby, frankly, I don't know how far to go and how excited to get with some of these horses, because I think, as I've said multiple times over the last 6 months, I think something special is happening in the US. I think there's an opportunity which emerges in the way that can every so often, where one team is on the up, another team is on the down. I think there's a couple of teams that have dominated from the Southern Hemisphere. Dominated is a bit much, but just basically the Aussies and the Kiwis have been so strong for so long. I actually think that I don't see the depth there that is currently in the US. The Brits and the Germans are going to fight it out in an all-European battle, and actually everybody has taken their eye off the US. I've been going on and on and on, so I don't want to kind of make it some kind of curse or some kind of overexcitement whereby you say it so much and then it doesn't happen. But, and it's a big but, even if it's not Protoni success, I think we can all feel and see over the last 3 or 4 years there has been a shift in what's happening in the US. And there is great quality, there is great horses there is great depth there, and that will just keep moving in one way. So I suppose I'm excited. I'm a little bit giddy, Nicole, at the prospect of just trying to pick 7 from, I'd say, a list of about 20 or 25 that I initially wrote down. But I will try my best.
And before we dive in there too, I think what's got me so excited is actually maybe not as much some of the horses we're going to talk today about. I mean, I am excited about them. Don't let me get that wrong. But I think too that a lot of the riders in the US have been quietly building their string. And so to your point, maybe it's not this year that we see them on the very top, but I think in the next few years, some of those horses are finally going to get to fruition, if we will. And that is very exciting to me.
Yeah, agree completely. There are so many riders that we were going, oh, it's them. And then we kind of start thinking, oh, but what about them? And they've got this horse that's coming up as well. They're definitely ones to watch. So there is a lot of strength and depth, which is exciting, Dee.
Yeah, there's a lot of strength and depth. I think it's interesting, when Frankie, and I'm saying maybe it's not this year. There's 2 ways I think of looking at that. And one part of me, because I think it's easy to come on a show and just name the top 7 horses that we can think of, or 7 of the top 10 horses in the US, have a little chat and go home. I actually want to try and keep these podcasts real. I want to talk about Parker Equine Insurance in a moment as to why we've been able to do these. But what I want to make sure is that we're having a real chat. And part of the real chat, Frankie, I would say, is personally, I think, okay, there are maybe some extenuating circumstances that you could maybe say in terms of the US. There's a little bit of a transitional period happening. Perhaps you could say that at management level, but I also don't want to always look to next year and the year after. I think in maybe you could say it this year because you've got World Eventing Championships, as they're now known, and then an Olympics next year. So maybe we are looking to next year. But I do think that if the US aren't delivering something big, either 2023, 2024, I think I'd be disappointed. If I'm honest, I would be disappointed if I didn't see it in the next 2 years, because we've already waited a good while. I feel like the last 2 or 3, 4 years have been building years. I don't want us to be in the building cycle forever. I think there is a point at which you got to get there. And I think and I hope for the US it's in these next couple of years.
It makes a good point. And I think there's a number of horses on this list, and it's a conversation we had prior to recording, that there's a few horses that might be obvious choices, but actually are heading towards the end of their career. And then there's sort of the new kids on the block, so to speak, who are very much on the upward trajectory. Dee, just touch upon Parker Equine Insurance, because as I say, we've done one of these shows for jumping. We managed to pick out some absolutely brilliant horses to watch for the jumping teams, but it's really exciting to be able to bring this kind of content together.
Well, it's part of the fun of, trying to access the market in different ways. So I suppose the most important thing to say is when we work with brands, I know, Frankie, on your side as well, or on the Equine side, we always try to align ourselves with something that we believe in and that we think is actually adding value to the people who are listening to these shows. So that's why we focused, obviously, in this case, on a US horses to watch, because we're hoping that actually we're talking to more US listeners than I would think the European, British and European listeners are interested, because they're the competition and it's always interesting to see what's going on over there. But I think it's interesting to try and access the US market and say, actually, have we got something of value? So I know that, and I'll let Frankie talk about it as well, but I know when we work with people like Parker Equine Insurance and Donna there, that actually you're able to know that you're talking to horsey people. And when you're dealing with insurance, it isn't just a case of filling out a form or talking to someone in a kind of I suppose the way that you can sometimes end up buying insurance, and we're talking about other aspects of our life, which is very much just built on an algorithm, that actually, if you're talking to people who have been in the equestrian space for, well, I think it's probably, is it 40, nearly 50 years maybe, and you're dealing with the same people who are actually willing to take a call and talk you through how to, insure your horse. Or I think, which is a really cool thing that they're doing, is, insure a group of horses, so that actually young horses and old horses and horses that compete more and horses that compete less can begin to balance each other out as kind of a portfolio, whether it's at the barn, whether it's your team of workers, trying to ensure that you have that package in place. The most important thing, I suppose, that appealed to me about doing something with Donna and with Parker Equine Insurance is that actually there were horsey people, and that anyone who's listening to this show who's involved in that space, who's in the US market, knows that actually there are horsey people at the end of a phone willing to talk about how best they could approach the insurance side of what they do every day. So that's the kind of the purpose of it, Nicole. That's why we're doing US Horses to Follow, and that's why I was very happy to be able to, and proud to be able to carry that name.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting that they've signed on. I don't know if you guys knew this, but I actually worked with Parker Equine Insurance, and that's why I, insured Chatwin through. So I have a fair amount of experience with them, actually, with his injury, and then he almost died of enteritis a few years ago. And I have to say, having Donna, who rides, and her team on the phone was so influential and so helpful in those decisions. And the check was there right away, and he could get everything he needed, and you feel like they're fighting on your behalf. But actually, Jimmy Stram, who's a friend of mine and, worked for athletics as well, which I didn't know about Parker Equine, they insure farms and all sorts of coverage. So they, in addition to having their horse side of the business, they also have a more standard insurance side as well as an insurance broker, which is really neat because Jimmy Stram insured her house through them, and her barn and her farm and her horses. And When Jimmy had a bad house fire recently, Donna, in the middle of the night was on the phone with her, and Jimmy told me again, like, how amazing they were through that process. So that was learning for me. And what I didn't know is that equine insurance can actually not only insure your horses, but can do all your things. So it's just one payment, your horse, your car, your farm, all of those things. So it was interesting to me because they have such great rates and they can be a one-stop shop for all insurance. So you're not worrying if you're missing something, and you kind of have coverage, and you're not paying too much on one side, but not enough on others because they balance each other out. So yeah, in addition to the horse piece, I think that was the thing. I insured Chowan with them and had such a great experience, but I didn't know that they also did a lot of other stuff that I could also reach out to them about.
That's very interesting, because I saw actually Jimmy and Dom recently, obviously, when they had their house fire, and it was so destructive. And you always think, things like that won't happen, but actually they do, and they can. And to be covered in those instances is huge. I know Sam has started a campaign to get Parker Equine Insurance over to Ireland. So I don't know how well that's going, but we're working on it, listeners. Look, let's dive in to horses to watch. I'm going to set the ball rolling. Okay, so US horses to watch. The aim is 7, listeners. Who knows how many will go? We probably won't count, just so that we can mention a few more. And I am actually going to go on Equiratings as numbers and say that for me...
Hang on, before you say anything else, are you going... I just want to be clear, because I'm terrified. I'm not terrified, but I'm very much expecting you to take the most loved, most fan favorite. I'm expecting you to put the ball into the open goal first thing out and leave me then, as I get down the list, going, oh, which one am I picking? Which way am I going? Just tell me, just put me out my misery straight away. Are you going to do what I think you're going to do?
She's definitely going to do it. 100%.
I don't know what you think I'm going to do, because I'm just going to
talk faster and jump in.
Who are you talking about? Because I think we might be talking about different people.
I'm talking about my bomb, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I wasn't, you see.
You weren't?
No.
What?
I was talking about the horse that is on Equiratings numbers, the number 1 ranked horse in the US on the Equiratings ELO. So that is Philip Dutton's Z, who has an ELO of 763, which is higher than any other horse on US soil. So that's who I was going for. I mean, he has been to Olympic Games. He's been top 10 at Kentucky last year. He won Tryon 4-star short at the end of last year, having come back from Tokyo. Extremely competitive in all phases, and has the maestro that is Philip Dutton on board. For me, that is an open goal. He is on the list.
It is an open goal. Z is clearly going to be on the list. I think for all the reasons that you've spoken of, I should say this gets interesting. This is where the first phase thing becomes really important, because Z is not going to touch my bomb in the first phase, and he's not going to set the world on fire in the first phase, but actually to win lots of the big competitions and to be as consistent and as to build a rating like Z has built. You don't need to be able to do 22s and 23s. You do need to be able to put together runs and runs and runs of such strong cross-country form that Z has shown. They're good enough in the dressage. And by the way, I'm talking about the top horses in the US. So when I say good enough, I'm talking about they're pretty much always sub 30. So they were 30.3 at the 5-star in Kentucky in 2021. But other than that, I think you're probably going back to probably 10 events, maybe. Yeah, you're going back to 2019 before you're actually getting even another 31.8. So look, and Aiken, maybe 2019, 30.6. They're always sub 30. The problem is, or not the problem, but the reason I don't think that they get the plaudits maybe in terms of the talking that my bomb will get is that they're probably never going to lead the dressage at the big ones in a silly manner. They're always just going to be in that 28 to 30 mark, very, very consistently between 28 and 29 for probably nearly 15 major competitions now. So it's a very good indication, Nicole, for me, of the difference between why some of the very consistent horses who are able to go clear and show jump clear, I think they've had the 2 rails of Tokyo. But other than that, it was really that was so unexpected as well.
They're very, very consistent. And I think the other thing that I would pick up on is that he's actually only 14 this time. He feels older. In my mind, he's been on the scene for a long time. He was actually best of the US combinations in Tryon 4 years ago when he was a 10-year-old, which was a massively impressive result when he finished in 13th, just outside the top 10. And he was 4th at Kentucky that year as a 10-year-old as well. So, he's been at the top level for a long time now. And he's had plenty of good wins. He's yet to have a really great one. And I wonder if that might come in 2022. So I'm going to say Philip Dutton, Z, first horse on the list. Let's move on. Shall we go on to Tammy Smith and My Balm, who you both immediately...
Can I say one thing before we go to Tammy? Because who knows how long we'll spend on Tammy. Here is something that I think you will be surprised at, and I think it goes to, maybe not surprised at, but I don't think Z gets that much talk. Frankie, I don't know if you would disagree in the US, but certainly at a kind of capturing my heart and capturing, the talk, I think Z is seen as a very good, consistent horse. But I'm looking at not just the current ELO rating, Nicole, I'm looking at the all-time rating. So all-time now being an EC ratings all-time, which is 10 or 12 years. But Z has built the highest rating. He's currently sitting on a 768. That's the highest rating we've seen of a US horse in that time. So next on the list is Loch and Glen, when he was, I suppose, probably going into Kentucky 2016 was probably when he was peaking in terms of his rating at a 736. Marlon Little's RF Tabasco from 2013. They're the top 3. So this isn't, it isn't something that comes along all that often. We've got 2 other horses on the list that we'll come to today, which are in places 4 and 5. I won't say them yet. And then you've got Donner and Lynn Szymanski from 2017.
I don't think he nearly has the buzz that would warrant.
No buzz.
It's interesting. I think he just, I don't know, for some reasons he's kind of got the stereotype. He's just a good old soldier and just keeps doing his job and puts his head down and does the work. And I think that comes a little bit from you're saying though, Diarm, he's not going to be a world beater on the flat, but he is going to go and deliver a performance you can count on every time. And so, I think that, when the world was looking at him, unfortunately he had 2 rails in the show jumping, but he kind of quietly just keeps ticking along. And again, at only 14, I think he's going to just stay consistent on the flat. And I think he's going to keep doing his job with Philip, under Philip's tutelage for a long time.
Interestingly, so he had 9 clear rounds show jumping in a row prior to those 2 rails down in Tokyo. Tokyo was very, very different circumstances. It was a very different event to anything anybody had really seen before. So, but I think that is, he's had lots of good wins, yet to have a great one, yet to sort of really make the headlines in any respect, but is so, so solid. As a team horse, he is brilliant because he is very dependable and very, very consistent. And I think that is key. So he is on the list. My Balm. Let's go to Tammy and My Balm, because we're building up to Badminton. They've just been out this last weekend, as we're recording this, listeners, and picked up a new dressage record for the venue at Carolina. And that was a 20.7, I think, off the top of my head. Massively impressive in the first phase. Is surely going to be one of the dressage favourites at Badminton. And I think has a great shot at producing a really, really big performance this year.
Well, I think it's interesting going off of, what Diarm said about Z and his consistency on the flat. I mean, here you're seeing a horse that is equally that consistent, but it's 10 points lower, and I mean, you expect a 20 out of him now, or at least I do. And I think, he's a horse that he's continued to get better with age. And watching him jump last week at Carolina, the guy looks better than I think I've ever seen him look. Yeah, he looks absolutely fantastic. And, I think as well, for me, he's a horse that's interesting because obviously I've watched his career very closely, ridden alongside Tammy with him a lot and been around him a ton. And he's such a funny horse. Like in the barn, he, as amazingly beautiful as the world thinks My Balm is, he feels the same. he, in his day to day, the guy thinks he's definitely as beautiful as the world thinks, which is funny about him. And, the Aherns and Markel family have supported Tammy with this horse his whole journey, really. And for me too, he's a horse that, again, he's won a lot of shows, but I just think they're still yet to deliver a big one. And I wonder if that's this year. I have a feeling it is. And I think, it's finally going to be Tammy and Lexus's time to win a big one.
I feel like and we had Tammy on the show earlier this year, and she said Tokyo was tough and he found it tough. And she will have learned an awful lot about him from that experience. There were a lot of people that said she should be on the team, and there was a reason that she wasn't, and she's obviously worked unbelievably hard on everything over the last few years. But that getting that close to something makes you unbelievably hungry. And she is a real competitor anyway. And I think that she will have been extra motivated, extra driven, and all eyes on my barm this year. I'll be honest, if I was as good looking as Lexus, as my barm, I'd think I was good looking too. Listeners, he is blooming gorgeous. If you haven't seen him, go and look at some pictures. If you're going to Badminton, look out for him because he is just stunning.
Yeah, Frankie, I remember talking to you when everybody was in Aachen before they ended up going to over to Tokyo when they were in that quarantine in Aachen. US horses were there, and we had the inside line because Sam was there, so we were able to hear everything that was going on. And I know Sam was telling me that like everyone was warm. I think nearly all the teams were there. The Brits weren't there, but nearly everyone else was, maybe the Germans as well. But basically everybody was like walking around being like, who is that US horse that's going to win Tokyo? Like, we might as well not go. And it was Tammy. And, Tammy was like, oh my God, shut up. Like, I just cannot even deal with this, that everybody is obsessing over my bomb. And obviously, it was in the circumstances that they weren't going. And as Nicole has mentioned, it was one of those, decisions that split opinion. What I think is really interesting here is that, I suppose, in the same way as I think that Philip and Z are a little bit underrated or underloved, I suppose, certainly that they don't have that buzz about them for a horse that I believe has achieved an incredible amount. Nicole, you're right, though, without that kind of top level win, or top level win, but you know what I mean, without the kind of the glitz and glam maybe of a 5-star, like maybe Connaught at Kentucky or something like that. They haven't got that yet. Tammy's almost the opposite in that I feel like everybody is rooting for them. Everybody is talking about them. I think, the place would just explode with, I don't know now from the inside. So I appreciate, that everyone will have different opinions on this, but certainly from the outside of the US looking in, she's just so hugely popular and everybody just wants this so much for them. My bomb feels like they are, as a combination, they're on the tip of everyone's tongue right now. That's probably been the case since, I expect, Kentucky last year, for the people who are arriving late on the scene. Maybe even, maybe it could go back even further. I suppose when they had those Pan Ams. If we start the journey at those Pan Ams, I think it probably, the fact that they were so good in the dressage, they have been, as Frankie said, they've been hovering around the 20 mark, between 20 and 23, 24 for nearly 3 years now, I would say. So sometime between 2018 and 2019, their dressage moved from 27 to 24, 23, and has stayed there ever since and gotten better. I think the 11 penalties at Kentucky was a massive blow in terms of what people thought of them, because it came off the back of that Lima Pan Ams where they'd had a bad cross-country day. And in the same way as I think people don't love Philip enough, I think people think my bomb is worse at cross-country than he is. He's nearly a perfect record. Like, he just has the 11 at Kentucky, but he has the...
And the Pan Ams.
Well, that's what I mean, the Pan Ams. But other than that, you're going back to Fair Hill in 2014?
This would be the argument, though. Z is so consistent, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And then there's the two of arguably the two most high profile events they've done have picked up two cross country. And so they're the ones that stick in your mind. But I'm not arguing her off the list because I think she damn well deserves to be there.
Oh, no, she's on the list.
They
she's on the list.
Potentially capable of winning one of the big ones this year. Like, don't be surprised.
No. What I would be saying there, Nick, is I completely agree. What I'm saying is sometimes when I'm looking at a horse that can do a 21, so some of Bettina's, if you think about like a Designer, if you think about maybe a Scandalous with Marlon Little, you're always thinking, if you're able to do a 20, are they actually, is the same horse basically that's that good at dressage able to be good at cross country? Because often they aren't always things that go hand in hand. But what I would be saying here is when you look at the actual numbers beside My Bomb, it is absolutely incredible. It's 40 in Fair Hill, it's 40 in Lima, it's 11 at Kentucky, and it's their whole career. You're talking about about 40 internationals, all at good big competitions, and you're talking about that. For me, My Bomb, as you mentioned, the Markel family, I just think My Bomb, Tammy, Eric, I just think that whole little triangle around getting this right, I think it's coming, and I think there'll be a big outpouring of support and emotion for them when it does. And I love that. I just think you don't always need to be cold, clinical, successful Z. I think equally you can be, oh my God, Tammy is going to actually win this. Like, she could go to badminton and win this. We might have a badminton winner from the US before a US Kentucky winner. And genuinely, they will go.
Imagine the scenes if that happens.
Honestly, if you can do a 21 dressage and you've got a record like that cross country.
And you can show jump clean. I mean, they consistently show jump clean.
Yeah. I would think they'll be in the favorite.
I think she's got a little bit, not a target on her back, but a little extra reasoning, like you said. I mean, I talk to Tammy almost every day in Tokyo, and that was really hard for her mentally, like to be there and be so close to your dream yet so far away, right? And then I think too, there's a little bit, let's be honest, that the team didn't really deliver how the US would have hoped. So I think with that, there's always that thought, and I've heard a bunch of people mention it here in the States since then, like if they'd taken the risk and put her on the team, would the results have been different? And none of us know that. But, I think since she won the Forlong, or now Maryland, right? I think, after that, we really expected him to put in a top 5-star finish in the year after, or so, close to that. And then he had a bit of injury. And I don't know, to me, he just seeing him and knowing the horse well, seeing him this week at Carolina, I think it's your time to shine, Lexus, and all the pieces seem to be right. He looks in good fighting form. His rider has a bit of bangs and bruises she's working to get out before badminton.
She's tapped out.
Yeah, she's a tough cookie. She's got a little break in her hand and some things. But I think, with a partnership that's been together this many years and had success, I'm very excited to watch what happens in a few weeks' time.
Nicole, I know you're going to kill me because we're half an hour in and we've talked about two horses. So this is the last thing I'm going to say on it. But I just want to say this before you say, okay, number 3, please, hurry up. Last thing I want to say on My Bomb is I think part of the reason that part of what makes sport and what makes our sport in particular in eventing so special is the stories which accompany it. Like Frankie, from a baseball side as well, like the Oakland A's story and the curse and all of the things that go with all of the different stories around baseball are a big part of what brings emotion to sport. And part of the My Bomb story is, of course, that this combination and Lexus was at the top of the sport, really, or was like on this journey and then got injured. And it was, what was it, the full 2016 season, pretty much all the 2017 season, they didn't compete. And when you're off for 2 seasons like that, to come back and to be so strong, 18, 19, 20, 21, like to be so strong and so consistent after a gap like that, when you think about the amount of money, the amount of emotion, the amount of time that's going into every single horse, I think there is something special about My Bomb missing that long and then returning with Tammy to the very top of the sport, you know, to be leading Kentucky, to have that moment at Kentucky, to be one of the most talked about horses not at the Olympics. I know that's not a nice thing, but it is a fact. They were probably the talking horse of Tokyo, even though they weren't even there. And now we're preparing for a World Games season, a badminton debut, and Paris tilt probably next year. There is a special story, I think, woven into that, which is part of the missing years as well. Now we can go. I just think it's a nice piece.
You are completely right. And I think the emotion, as you say, in our sport is special. So watch this space over the next few weeks, because this is something, listeners, that could be sooner rather than later. Okay, next one, I'm going to throw the next easy one to include out there. And actually, again, this rider, you could argue, could have a number of horses on the list. But actually, we're going to go with the Aachen winner. Of course, we are, off the record, ridden by Will Coleman, the man with the beautiful hair. Now, he won in top class company in Aachen last year, but he also has other wins at 4-star short level. He's been top 15 in Kentucky last year. And again, he was one of those horses that travelled for Tokyo, went over for quarantine, didn't get to go on to Tokyo and compete. But again, very, very hungry. Will just comes off the back of a win at Carolina with Don Dante, another horse that we could arguably put into this list. He's got a great young up-and-coming horse in Chin Tonic as well, that's at 4-star level that we could see step up to 5-star maybe later this year or next spring. So he's got real strength and depth, but off the record is the one that I am going to highlight next for the list. All in agreement, Frankie? You saw them in, have you seen them this year? Actually, they didn't run in Carolina.
Yes. No, I haven't seen them this year. They didn't run at the showcase or at Carolina. I did see Don Dante, obviously, at Carolina last week, and I thought that's a horse I haven't spent a lot of time watching on the flat before. And I'll be honest, like, he's got all the big pieces that he needs to get that done, and put forth some really stellar performances on the flat. So he looks like kind of right there. It's just about, I think, building a bit of consistency for him in that phase. But he jumped super, and, you know, where only 2 people were able to get under the time. I think 3 horses and 2 people, and Will was one of them. So proving again that, you know, he's a heck of a jockey when it comes to making the time on, you know, whether it be on Off the Record or Don Dante, whomever it is. And I think, I think his horses are in top form.
Big rider, I think, for the next few years.
Huge.
Definitely another talking point of Tokyo. I think Off the Record, doing what he does in Aachen is a conversation. It makes it a bigger conversation as to him not being at Tokyo. I mean, not to take away from the Tokyo horses, because I think it's very easy after the fact to say, oh, this could have been different and that could have been different. I don't believe, for example, almost like Donner previously, I don't think you can say Z having 2 down is anything you can prepare for, because Z had a perfect show jumping record almost going into that. So I don't really want to compare it to a selection thing or an after the fact thing, but it is a big part of what builds the strength and depth of the US over the coming years, to have the Aachen winner not there, to have My Bomb not there. So on top of the horses that have already been Olympians, De Niro Z, who I'm sure will come to, not there. So Aachen for me, what gets Off the Record on the list, Carolina is a big win to kick off the 2021 season for them, but Aachen just actually puts the US back in a place in Europe which they haven't been. I mean, Ariel had the top 3 in a 5-star, which was, I think, the first we'd seen probably since Sinead Halpin, maybe 2013 with Manoir de Carneville, was it? And maybe Boyd 2014? Maybe he was even
Manoir de Carneville was 2012. Boyd did it with Shamwari, didn't he?
Was that 2013? But you're going back into that region. Then Ariel comes in and does it. But being honest, we haven't seen US horses tearing up Europe. And we've been watching, this is kind of across the last decade, we've been watching European horses go to the flagship show in the US and win, and we hadn't been seeing US horses coming back the other way and delivering anything major. And I think there's a few times that begins to break. I think Ariel's podium finish in a 5-star is the first time that you're kind of like, hang on, wait a second, there's something's happening here. I think the reason you've got to put Off the Record on the list is to win Aachen is an absolutely incredible achievement. You'd put it up there alongside any of the big championships in terms of the quality of field, in terms of the test which these horses face. Will Coleman Off the Record creates what I believe will be a watershed moment with the Aachen win. And for that reason, I think it'll be a time that we look back on where we said, actually, that was the first sign that we had for what came in 23, 24.
Yeah, I think you're right. It gave it an entirely different feeling. And the level of excitement that we took from that performance, and the US team performance as well, because the team went very, very well. They had a second place finish in the Nations Cup, really pushed the Brits all of the way. Then went on to Buccalo, obviously, and went very, very well as a team performance too. Just for me, Will Coleman feels like he has been on lots of American teams and has been a real stalwart of US teams. And he's actually only been to Olympics in London and the World Games in Tryon. And I feel like there's a lot more in there still. So Will Coleman on the list for the purposes of this show, Off the Record, one to watch this year. Excited. And I know they led after the first two phases in Red Hills as their first 4-star for short this year, had a couple of really good national runs prior to that. The horse went very well cross country, head and shoulders above the rest of the field, had a massive margin going into the show jumping, had knocked his stifle on the cross country, so didn't present on the final day. I'm hoping that everything is okay there and recovery will be quick and that we will get to see him in Kentucky, in which case I think we will be talking about him as one of the favourites. Who wants to go next? Frankie, do you want to throw a name into the mix of somebody that we have yet to talk about?
Yeah, I'll throw one in. I like Alyssa Phillips' horse Oscar. I mean, I think, we started off really talking about horses with huge accolades next to their name, but, we'd have to look it up in the USEA record. But this horse had so many wins in a row, I think over 10. Consistency is key, and they've got it. And Alyssa Phillips is a very, very promising young professional for the future of our sport. Trains with Jenny Brannigan, has a new farm in Florida where Jenny's basing and Alyssa bases, and she's got some stellar horses. I mean, Oscar's just one on a list of several that she has that she's consistently producing top results with. And for me, this is a horse that's going to have a breakout year. They're planning to do the 4 short at Kentucky, then go on and do the 4 long, I believe, in Montana at Rebecca Farm. And for me, she's not only someone to watch for the future of our sport here in the U.S., but this horse is one who could make big waves for her doing it.
I think almost like in the same way, Nicole, as we can say Will Coleman, strength in depth is really exciting, in that you can kind of say, okay, you mentioned like probably not enough major championship performances, not enough major championships for Will over the last 10 years in terms of where his standing, I would say, is. There's been great competition in the US, but like he always feels like he should be there.
Yeah, 100%.
I think Alyssa Phillips will be there over the next decade. I think Frankie, you said it's not just Oscar, and I was thinking, Alyssa Phillips, why have I got so many Alyssa Phillips records in my head? And went back to check, and of course it's Cornelius Bow and Effie Celestino are the other 2 horses. Not just on any one particular, but like when you just look at the absolute, like again, their form over like as a rider, Alyssa's form as a rider over the last couple of seasons, she has more wins than she has pretty much anything else. Like it's 1-2, 1-1, 1-8, 1-1, 1-2, 4, 10, 16. Like it's absolutely incredible what she's doing over her horses. Oscar being one. Look, the Kentucky, the big. Was that an AEC win? The Kentucky 4. Oh, was the Kentucky 4-star short win?
It was the really tough one.
It was the horrible year.
Yeah, she won that one last year when everybody, absolute carnage, and she delivered on a day where it was really tough to come home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, that's the standout. To deliver on a day where it is really tough conditions shows real grit and strength of character. And it would have been a very, very big performance for Alyssa. You know, she's a young rider making her name, and she beat some very, very good combinations that day.
This is big. Is she going in your list of 7, Nicole?
Yeah, yes. Oscar,
Yeah?
Alyssa Phillips, she's in. Right.
Oh, here we go.
Next. Okay. I think we've probably got to go to the man who we could argue a number of horses. I think the question isn't that he's going to be on the list, it's which horse is he on the list with. And that would be Boyd Martin, who is obviously the Maryland 5-star winner. He's the current US National 5-star champion. He's the current US National Advanced champion.
What is that? National 5-star champion? Is that just the best of the US?
US 5-star champion. That's the best placed US finisher at Kentucky.
Yeah, that's just giving them.
Well, do you know what? Take it.
I think why it is, I'll just go ahead and say this. This is horrible to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think that comes to play, right? Because like an extra trophy, it goes back to like Kentucky, right? Where it's like, oh, you're the best of the Americans. Like, it's like similar to saying like, oh, you were the best, like under this age in the field. Like, well, who cares? You didn't win. But I mean, we do care. But I still think we need to. He won the event as well outright, so that makes it more relevant in this case.
In Maryland. Maryland.
I would, so for me, I think the argument is which horse. So On Cue is the horse that was well placed and got him that highest US place finisher, I think 4th in Kentucky, won the advanced class at the AECs, and that was a big money class, and then obviously went on to win the 5-star at Maryland, which was the first US winner of a 5-star since 2008. So massive performances from that mare, a real standout year for her. Can she come out this year and deliver the same? Then you've got the likes of Setzelag, the horse that he took to the Olympic Games, who actually, in my eyes, had a quieter season last year. You know, he fell at Kentucky. All eyes were on Tokyo, and he went well enough in Tokyo, but he didn't perhaps get the performance that they would have all been looking for. That being said, he's coming out this year, and I imagine Kentucky is the plan, and it'll be all systems go there. And he has been really hitting lower numbers in the first phase. So he's able to be in the sort of the 23 to 25, 26 category, which is very, very important when we're talking about this level of competition and winning the big ones. So you've got the sort of the big 2 5-star campaigners, and then you've got his 2 up-and-coming campaigners in Luke 140, who I'm a massive fan of, but spent a lot of time last season on the sidelines. I mean, he was selected for Tokyo on Luke 140. We cannot forget that. And actually the horse picked up an injury. I kind of feel with him, we need to see them come out and deliver this year. And then there's Frankie, one that I know has really impressed you this year. And when Dee was talking about the emotion earlier on in the show, is one that has absolutely stacks of it in Fetterman B. Yeah,
I mean, you got to talk about an emotional situation, right? You got to root for that horse. He just won at Carolina, and I watched him there. I watched him at the showcase win again. And I think for Annie's family to decide to continue on with this horse and in her honor a bit, you know, after she bought him and brought him all the way, and he is so big in her life and career, you got to root for them. I've never seen Boyd so emotional after his win at the Equine Showcase, and if you were there, it was absolutely special. You know, when they're there honoring Annie's life, and then for the horse to win was pretty magical. But I think, too, why you're seeing that and those results is, you know, Boyd's taken a little bit of time to make him his own ride, and I think they're coming together now. You know, I think when it first started out, a little bit, Fetterman B was kind of looking at Boyd like, well, who the hell are you and where's my girl? And now they're finding their way, you know, with a really special angel to look down on them to do it. And I don't wonder if that's going to end up being a very big horse for Boyd String in the really near future here.
How special would it be? I mean, just for anybody that isn't familiar with the story, so Annie Goodwin, who really tragically passed away in a cross-country training accident last year, Fetterman B was her ride, and her family, as Frankie say, have kept the horse going and in Annie's memory and her name. And at the showcase earlier this year, there was this enormous memorial, and then her horse goes on to win with Boyd, and it was just incredible. But he's now backing that up. He had that good advance win in Carolina you mentioned, so the results are coming, and let's be truthful, no better man on board. So my question for you two is, of Boyd's 4 horses that I've just mentioned there, I mean, by all means, feel free to find any others of his that ought to be talked about, but they're for me the big ones. Who do we think is the US horse to watch for Boyd in 2022?
It feels like when you say to watch that you should not be picking Sexy Legs, just because I think we've seen Sexy Legs. You know, it doesn't feel like, sometimes I think to watch, does that mean and maybe, you know, minute 48 of the Parker Equine Insurance eventing 7 to follow is not the time to be asking this question. But I'm going to say that I would like to put Luke 140 on the list, purely because I feel that there's not that much between those first 3, Sexy Legs, Luke 140 and On Cue. And I think Luke probably at the moment feels like he has a potentially bigger ceiling. I don't know that. I don't have any inside information at all on this. So I'm just kind of saying that to be different. But I think, but if I'm honest, I think that is the case. Like, Sexy Legs has been one of my favorite horses ever. What I think is really interesting about this approach, we've talked about it with Alyssa Phillips, we've talked about it with Will Coleman, and now we're going to talk about it with Boyd. What I think is happening here is he wants to be world number 1. He's currently world number 9. There's a big old group of the US riders who are kind of in that 15. So Will Coleman's there, Tammy, Doug Payne, who I'm sure we'll come to. They're all sitting within that 15, 16, 17, 18. Lauren Nicholson is there. And Philip, they're all between kind of 15 and 22 in the world. Boyd is 9. I think Boyd has an incredible, possibly more so than his kind of laid back Aussie style sometimes suggests. But I think he is ultra competitive. I think he wants to win. I think when you see like the mad stuff, not the mad stuff, but like the out there stuff that he's doing in terms of everything he can do to get a marginal gain, I think Boyd will push his body and himself and everything around him to the limits to get to the world number 1. I think winning Maryland was just the first step for him in terms of what his actual plans are for dominance. He was so close to winning Kentucky. Not this year, although Setzer was traveling very well when he fell, but when he got that 28.1, I think he was he second a couple of years ago. So yeah, I would be, this is not the show, Nicole, but I'm so focused here on rider rather than person. And I think the horses are all fairly good horses. I think what makes them special, more so possibly than anybody else in the US right now, what makes his horses special is him. And I think he will have a few moments of spark that can spark with possibly any of those front 3 in Setzer, On Cue or Luke 140. And if he can get it to happen at Protoni, or if he can get it to happen at Kentucky or Maryland, he'll be pleased. And I actually honestly couldn't say which one it'll happen on.
Okay, well, in that case then, Frankie, you have the casting vote. You get to pick Boyd's horse on the list.
I still want Tetserleg. I'm sorry, but I think the other horses are coming up, and I think they're great horses, all of them. I mean, honestly, it is really hard to pick. But I think, again, it's a horse that I think he still looks in top form. And it might be that he's, part pony when you look at him or whatever it is. But I think he's got, another real good season in him. And I think finally, maybe not finally, but he's just so consistent now on the flat. And I do think actually that when horses like this horse get kind of up in their career, we don't always see them able to kind of continue to shave down points here and there. And I think that's where Silva and, Boyd's program has been influential in that he's continued to get a little better every year.
Yeah, he has.
Good old Thomas.
Okay, we'll go.
He's in the list. Keep him in.
Go with Thomas. Sexy Legs is on the list. Right. Now, listeners, we head into, I think, murky waters because there are so many good combinations that it feels actually like we will be missing people.
Now it gets hard.
We've got to narrow it down. So let's throw a few names out there and we can debate them. We've touched upon one of those horses that went very, very well last year with the podium finish in Le Moulin, and that was Ariel Grold's Leah Moore Master Plan, which is massively exciting. had been really knocking on the door. They had that incredible performance at Burley, actually. They've got some real strength and depth at 5-star now in their form. Top 10, I think. Just outside the top 10, maybe 11th. Burley 2019, a really tough Burley. So, yeah.
They're a yes for me.
They're a yes for you. Okay, Leah Moore master plan.
Yeah.
Do you know the plan for Leah Moore master plan?
I think they're going to badminton.
Are they? Oh, I might. They could well be. They could well be. Hang on. Let me check that list.
I could just have made that up in my head, but I thought
they
that
could
was
well
the
have been.
plan.
I've got the entries here. I'll double check. They could well have been. Here we go. There's such a good US contingent. Oh, they are going to badminton. Beg your pardon. They are going to badminton. Excellent. Along with Will Fordry, Mama's Magic Way, who I absolutely love. Okay, so Leah Moore master plan, Ariel Grolder on the list for you, Frankie. D, do you agree? Have we just got one space left to fill?
Well, I can't disagree with the Ariel selection. So yes, if you're asking me, should they be in the top 7? I think they should. The problem for me arises that if you say yes to that, it leaves you with a very difficult conversation to have around a final spot. And I wouldn't like, I mean, you haven't mentioned De Niro Z, who I believe should be on the list. And you haven't mentioned any of Doug Payne's. And I think there's at least one of those should be on the list. So
I agree. I think Star Witness and for sure De Niro Z. I think, I think both those we might have to do an extra.
We can expand the list. We can expand the list. I mean,
okay, plus one. We're doing a plus one.
Yeah, plus one.
The great 8.
Spot. The great 8. Oh, I like it. The great 8. The US.
You get a plus one to this event.
Yes, exactly. De Niro Z, I think, like everybody was talking about him as one of the favourites going into Kentucky last year. And he was selected for the Olympics and then obviously didn't happen, picked up an injury, didn't see him again internationally last year. I know he's back in work. I haven't seen him.
I know Liz was planning to take him to Carolina, but unfortunately she parted ways with another horse at the event prior and banged herself up pretty good, got some good old broken separated ribs. So she's been spending a bit of time in the, whatever you call that, the cold bath. And, I think that wasn't no fault of De Niro Z's, put it that way. But I think she's ready to have another crack at it, no pun intended. Next week, I think it's Stableview. So I think he's ready to go. And, it's just his rider got shelved for a few weeks on no fault of his.
Liz is a tough cookie, so she must have been in pain. I would be really interested because obviously he's not entered for badminton. Kentucky entries, not sure, but would be leaving it pretty late to come back for Kentucky now, perhaps. I'd be fascinated to see where he might go, whether we could see him at Le Moulin.
I think you're going to see him at Le Moulin, is my prediction.
He's been top 10 there before, so that'll be good to watch. Okay, I agree. De Niro Z.
He's in.
What I would say on De Niro Z briefly, Knickers, is that I think it's a great example of how very, very fine lines can end up, really impacting people's. Frankie, you've had it with Chatwin, like really unfortunate injuries and timing of certain things can have such a major impact on someone's career.
I think for good. I think for good and for bad, though, right?
For good, absolutely. For good and for bad.
I think back to the year I went to the Mullen with Chat and was meant to go to Kentucky, and then he had this weird injury, and then a week later he was totally fine. And you think about stuff like that, and I think sometimes, I'm a bit of a weirdo, but I think sometimes the universe has a different plan for you, and it sucks in the moment. But with that happening to Liz last year, you couldn't help but just be so gutted for her, right? Like she worked so long and so hard for this moment and finally had the moment and was on this high, and then the moment's gone. And I think, for that, you kind of, you look at people and it's interesting, but you see kind of how they pick themselves up and how they come back, not only as a rider, but as a combination with your horse, right? And I think when those moments happen with a horse that you've had a long time, like De Niro Z for Liz, I really think that what's special then is if it's a special partnership like this one is, then you learn as a rider to appreciate each moment. It's almost like the universe knocks you back down when you're on this big high and says, like, you need to appreciate each moment because the moment could be gone in a split second. And so I think Liz appreciated him before, but I think even more so you'll see that this year with their partnership. And I don't know, for me, it was gutting for her last year, but you can't help but wonder. I don't think he's particularly old yet, and you can't help but wonder if there's something bigger on the horizon in the near future.
Agree. He's 14 this time, so that feels like a few of the horses. And I think there's a couple of others that we could talk about. We're perhaps going to go on now to talk about Doug Payne and one of his perhaps up and coming superstars. But there's a few horses that are really reaching their prime, which could be very, very exciting for a championship performance later this year as we head to build towards big US performances over the next couple of years with the strength and depth that is pushing through from underneath. Let's talk about Doug Payne, because Van Diver is the obvious choice. Has such a solid, consistent record. I mean, he is just incredible. He had another top finish at Carolina last week, but he's 18 this time. Previously won numerous times at 4-star short level. He's just a very, very, very good horse and has been a brilliant star for Doug over the years. However, I am drawn on the basis that he is 18. He's not going to have a breakthrough year this year to go towards one of his up-and-coming stars. And Frankie, you threw the name into the list of Star Witness, who was second in Carolina and very impressive there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me with Star Witness, the interesting thing was I've always kind of questioned, obviously with her previous roots of not being a eventer early on in her career and some things, like I've kind of wondered, like, is she fast enough? For me, she has all the attributes, right? But she's not your stereotypical event horse when you look at her. And I think she does. I think that seeing her in Carolina this weekend was interesting to me because it's almost like she's finding her way a bit in eventing still, even though, it doesn't maybe seem like that. She really hasn't been eventing for that long. And was a hunter, I believe, when Doug got her. And you look at her and she's stunning on the flat. She's got everything it takes. I think he's going to try to do some Grand Prix with her on the flat and get his dressage medals there too with her. And so, she's a horse that dabbles kind of in everything, and she certainly has what it takes. And I'll be honest, in a field at Carolina where only, again, 3 horses came inside the time, she was one of them. And it was impressive. I think he'll call her the big girl or something like that in the barn. But I think that lady's got it. I think she can put the jets down. And I have to say, whatever horse you pick about Doug, I was again this season in watching him at the showcase at Carolina, wherever we've seen him. It's almost funny because all of these riders are very casual, right? This is their day job when you see them in the box. But to me, Doug's the one who stands out. Like, he's cracking jokes as they're counting him down, and or at the showcase, there was a hold on course and he was on one of his younger horses and he goes over to the fence and all the little kids are petting the horse like they're at the petting zoo. And then, 1 minute later, he's out of the box. And he does a little bit have, a way to manage his mental space that I think really works for Doug. And I don't think you're going to see really a situation where he gets flustered because it's just, he's a cool, casual customer, and on all these horses. And I think I agree with you, Nicole. I think Van Diver, he's, I love the old boy, but I think he's kind of coming to the end of his career and almost ready to, take a kid around after a few more good runs with Doug. And yeah, I think he's got a good string. And if we're talking about riders more than horses, I think Doug's in for me. And I think Star Witness of his current group, I think he's got some horses with amazing potential, but maybe mentally they're not quite there yet on the flat. And for me, she is.
Yeah.
She was very, very good in Carolina. And Quantum Leap, another that, in his string that you could pick out. But I agree with Star Witness. I'm just going to throw 2 names in there as I don't think they make the list. but I think they should be. And I could go on for more names. I've got more written down, listeners. But I'm just going to say, watch out for them this year. One we've spoke about on the pod previously, BGS Firecracker and Mia Farley, who is a very, very good up and coming jockey.
Yeah.
The second at Red Hills, having had a much quieter couple of years for the horse. So look out for them. But they've been second at a 4-star long previously. So I imagine there'll be a spring 4-star long, possibly even a 5-star at the end of the year. And the other is Lynn Szymanski's RF Cool Play, who I reckon, if we had been doing this pod this time last year, would have been on the list, because they went to the Pan American Games in Lima 2019, got the individual silver, part of the team gold. They had the most extraordinary record at the 3-star level, stepped up to 4-star very solidly. And then last year, things just didn't quite go to plan. I think they had a couple of little niggles, and we saw her at Fair Hill for the 5-star, but she withdrew before cross country and then came out and did the 4-star short 4 weeks later or so, and finished 4th in Tryon. So very good. 12 months ago would have been on the list. Don't discount them. One to watch this year.
We haven't mentioned Lauren Nicholson and Landmarks Monte Carlo. Or Vermiculus, by the way. We haven't mentioned either of those. We haven't mentioned any of Sydney Elliott's. We haven't mentioned Woods Bachman.
Hallie Coon.
C'est la vie. We haven't mentioned the world champion and Hallie Coon.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a very interesting and hopefully very exciting chapter for Hallie's career. I think
had a couple of very good runs in Carolina as well. Has Mama's Magic Way coming over to badminton.
You have to mention the beautiful Brannigan and Stella Artois.
Yeah. God, there's some good horses about, aren't there? Like, doesn't it just
unbelievable, isn't it?
Hands together with glee and think, my goodness, there is strength and depth coming. These are good horses.
Yeah, and I know Georgia was looking at a couple of books as well in terms of trying to find angles for us as to how we could approach this. I mean, she probably thought, how long are they going to be talking for? But I know that Georgia, the analyst here at Equine, has put a lot of work into looking at what is the top-rated 7-year-old, what is the top-rated 8-year-old, what is the top-rated 9-year-old. You know, what horses will we expect to see not just at Paris, but possibly at the next World Championships beyond that as well. So that, I think, Nicole, will have to be saved at this point for another show, because I think if I was to just casually begin to throw out the best US 7-year-old, 8-year-old and 9-year-olds, that it wouldn't do justice to those. So I won't throw them in at the end of a show. Let's save them. But where I'm going with that is, I think if you're leaving, someone in the world top 20 and Lauren Nicholson off the list, I mean, I think that's a funny way to say this. This isn't an actual list of anything. It's just, people talking on a podcast. But if you're not going, if you're not,
official list.
Sorry, that's not an official list of anything other than the Parker Equine Insurance list. I think, I suppose it goes to the conversation we had at the very start of this. I don't think we were having this conversation with the same actual excitement, in the middle part of the decade. Let's say you're in 14, 15. I just don't know that they were all there. I don't think you could have gone to a list of probably 20 horses and said they're all great horses. And I think you can do that now in the US. And by the way, I think it is about time. I think the US should be doing that. I think they're big enough and they're bold enough. They've got enough resource. They've got enough talent. I think this is absolutely we shouldn't be making this out to be some kind of special, as you say, Frankie, reserve champion, national champion. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I think the US are big enough to be here, and now is the time. So 23 and 24 are the 2 seasons where I expect to see success. And based on that list, Nicole, I think we can reasonably expect to see some success. Yeah, we can.
Absolutely. Look, it has been lovely actually to delve into some of the discussion that got us all talking at the back end of last year, and some of those names in a little bit more detail. And listeners, we hope, even if you are not US based, that actually you've picked up some very, very good horses to watch for the next few years, and what could happen. Watch this space. Frankie, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, a little bit different to the alphabet-y.
What I love about Frankie, Nicole, is she just arrives for what's needed from her and then leaves. Once you get to the kind of chit-chat stage,
She's
and
like,
the
yeah,
wrap ups and the
I'm out
things.
of
She's
here.
like, I think you guys can deal with this stuff without me. Let's wrap up without Frankie.
Maybe it was the mention of Alphabetti. Like it was the mention of Alpha, and she was like, "Shoot, I'm out of here."
I don't think
it has been brilliant to go in and dig into a little bit more detail about some of these names. I'm looking forward to seeing what is going to happen this year, and actually, we're going to see a good few of them over the next few weeks. With Kentucky badminton very much on the horizon now, so exciting times. Thank you, Frankie. Before you left, thank you to Parker Equine Insurance for giving us the chance to be able to delve into the US the Great Eight?
Let's call them the Great Eight, the top 10. I mean, we can call them whatever we like. They're a great bunch of people and a great bunch of horses. So just call them the list. The list. There we go, listeners. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and we have got lots more coming your way on the Equratings Eventing podcast over the next few weeks. Of course, as I say, building up to Kentucky, building up to badminton, and some very special shows. Oh, I think Frankie might be coming back. Frankie, you're back.
Sorry, I could see you, but I couldn't hear you all of a sudden.
That's okay. We thought it was the mention of Alphabetti that scared you off.
Oh, no, I missed that fun. I am hoping to be invited on another one of those soon.
I'll send you a message. There's a date coming up. We'll hook you up with it.
Unless
Frankie,
I've been exiled by the listeners.
No, they loved it. It's all relatable. My first question for Frankie listeners when we started chatting today was, what have your kids been up to recently that is outrageous and will make me feel like I'm not alone?
And then after 45 minutes, we started the show when Frankie had answered that, what her kids had been up to.
Look,
careful
Frankie,
what you wish for.
Frankie, thank you so much. We'll get you back on Alphabetti soon. Dee, thank you. Listeners, thank you. We'll be back soon with more on the Equratings Eventing podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Equratings Eventing podcast.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. And I look forward to having you back with us soon.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more.
Listeners, we'll speak to you again soon.